Well, one sport might be enough for the majority of our guests, but for our best guests, we want to talk to people who have mastered multiple sports, maybe triple the amount of sports, and somehow managed to become inaugural champions in that. Today, we're talking to another triathlete, one of our favorite sports from the Olympics, and our guest today has had countless World Cup wins, Pan Am Games wins, gold medals from the Commonwealth Games, Canadian Sports Hall of Fame inductee, 2 Olympic medals, including the title as the first ever male gold medalist in the sport. And 23 years later, he's adding another first to his resume as the first ever Canadian/Australian that we've ever had on Off the Podium, which couldn't make us happier. We've been waiting 7, 8 years now to get a Canadian and an Australian, so Ben and I can stop representing two sides. Somebody who's checking all the boxes here. Yes. We're so happy to welcome the one and only Simon Whitfield. Simon, thanks so much for coming on today.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for giving me the plug on the old Aussie side and for things that happened many moons ago in a galaxy far away. Thanks for having me.
We're excited to talk about the Australian connection, which I'm sure we'll get into here. But first of all, the triathlon, to me, this is one of the most fascinating sports because you have stuff like the decathlon where you're doing one event at a time. I mean, this is a single event where you're mastering 3 separate disciplines and you're doing them back to back to back. And I mean, I would think any athlete's going to train years and years and years to get to that. And I think the craziest thing that I found is that you got into this before you hit puberty. I mean, it's crazy to me to think that somebody would actually even dare to compete in this, when they were 11, 12 years old. I mean, how do you fall into any of these sports individually, let alone a triathlon at such a young age?
I think it was just an excuse to be outside and having a short attention span. It gave you lots of things to think about and focus on. It's such a great sport for that. You're at the end of the day, you're just out exploring the great outdoors, and you're having these ridiculous skills in this arbitrary event is a bonus to all of that. So I just had a love of being in the lake and I love being out on my bike, and I was a good runner. And I played other sports, but I found this sport of triathlon, and then it was all things every day, all day for many, many years. And as they say, the rest is history. Oh, it's a great sport, though. Yeah.
Speaking of history, I love the quote that you apparently said when you were younger that you just wanted to be an Encyclopedia Britannica. That was kind of what you wanted to, which I did a bit of a search on that, Simon. And according to at least the website, you're not on there, which, I mean, come on, that's not
come
great.
On,
I know. Like, what's the deal with that going on there? But
add a 4th discipline there.
Yeah, exactly.
There you go.
Exactly.
You know what's funny is years down the line, you end up saying these things. A lot of the times in my case, I've said these things just to answer the question, right? So someone's like, "What's the goal?" And I say, like, I want to be an encyclopedia. And they go, "Okay, cool." And then like 25 years later, someone's like, "So one day you said you want to be an encyclopedia." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I was joking at the time."
Well, I think that goes half our questions for today, Simon. We might be screwed for the rest of this interview. So you didn't. Okay, gotcha.
That's a true story. I also apparently own a blueberry farm. Not a true story.
Okay.
And I've heard a couple other good ones that I literally along the way. I mean, there's some gems along the way that I said just in jest, and then years later came to be like, "Oh, I suppose I did say that," and I was just joking. But anyway,
I love that though, because that's like one of those ones where it kind of reminds me, like you get these really trashy like supermarket magazines, right? Where it's like, King Charles is definitely leaving Camilla because they said this, they said that. Easiest type of journalism in the world. But like, that's what I would always think, that if I was somebody in the public eye, I would like feed these lines to these things, like you're saying there, to have fun with it, because you're just like, let's see how much they go on. Hey, People magazine, Simon Whitfield says that he's secretly dating Meghan Markle and it's on the front page next week. Like, it'd be fun.
Modern day clickbait.
I think you know what it's a tribute to is the Aussie. It's the Aussie in me. That's an Aussie humor, right?
Yep.
Like you're taking the piss, and I grew up with an Aussie dad, and I was enamored with all things Australian until I went there, and then I was in a boarding house and learned how to. You took the piss and you got the piss taken out of you, and that I learned that there, and
You're welcome.
so. On your mate.
It's such a great mix of cultures because it's kind of like this joking, laid back, taking the piss mixed with a very nice, apologetic, friendly type of Canada and Australia are the perfect blend of cultures, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's thank you. That's that works. You're right, because you can like blame it on either side. You can
and then apologize for it later.
I'm so sorry. Totally. I'm like, oh, mate, I'm sorry. It was my Canadian, my Aussie side came out, and they're like, "Did you just say what you really think?" And now you're backing out of it by saying, "Just kidding, I'm Canadian." And yes, I am. That's exactly what happened. So yeah, there's a bit of that going on.
Interested to hear about the move to Australia, but I mean, before you even moved there, I mean, I don't think many people outside of Canada understand the significance of your hometown, and I'm hoping this isn't like the Blueberry Farm. I mean, Kingston, Ontario. I mean, music alone. I mean, this is the home of the Tragically Hip, Bryan Adams, and you add to that sports, and then you add to that like.
This
Don
isn't
Cherry.
A meatloaf. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Carl. This isn't like when I called out somebody from living in the town of Meatloaf and they had no fucking clue about that. Like, careful with your research. I've seen how this has gone before.
I can imagine those, especially like growing up. Yeah. You got Don, and my favorite hockey player of all time, Doug Gilmour. I mean,
that's right. There you go.
Yeah, was it significant growing up there? Like, had it quite reached that point where you realize this is like the home of champions in Canada?
I love that you know that. Yeah, I mean, when you're in grade 9, or I was in grade 8 actually, and my grandmother said, "There's this band. Have you heard of them from your school called the Tragically Hip?" And I'm like, "No, Gran, I've never heard of them." And I hadn't. And then we're 14 years old and we're at Fort Henry and Gord Downey's doing this thing. And I'm like, that's the guy from like, I've seen his picture in the hallway at school. And then obviously the legacy of this incredible Canadian band. And it's funny, I got a new mountain bike the other day, and for some reason I just felt it was appropriate. I went and I put on a live hip album and went out mountain biking. And what a legacy. The Hip of being, I think, isn't Dan Aykroyd a Kingstonian? Don Cherry, the Kingstonian, Kirk Muller. It's a great town. It was a great place to be from. I love going back and visiting, whether it's Wolfe Island or Kingston. Victoria's got a lot of Kingston, and there's something to be said for just that. There's just something historical here that has a bit of a flavor of Kingston. So great hometown, great place to be from, great place to visit.
Also, Podium host Ben Waterworth once upon a time was from Victoria. So there you go.
Exactly.
Fame of Victoria.
I'm on the wall of fame now for Victoria for my short, brief stint I lived in the city, which it's so funny. When I moved there, it's sort of through a relationship I was in at the time. And when I first met her and she told me she was from Victoria, literally the first thing I said to her, 94 Commonwealth Games. Like that's what I knew it from.
The snowstorm in 97.
Yeah. Yes, because they always like to remember those snowstorms. Just on the other sports you played as a kid, because I mean, I can imagine anybody who does a sport with multiple disciplines maybe has a bit of a trouble making their mind up. But I mean, what other sports were you playing as a kid outside of the cycling, the running, and the swimming aspect?
No, it's funny. The sport, that's an advantage I brought to triathlon that served me, because I played hockey, soccer, basketball growing up. Those were actually my primary sports. I was a good runner, but thank goodness when the running coach came and told my dad I should just be running, my dad said, nope, he's going to do sport because he loves sport. He's going to play whatever sport he likes. And it meant that I think I had an athleticism that doesn't necessarily, when you come from these single sports or in the safe endurance sports and you've got this like very linear move, you don't know how to move laterally, but also you don't know how to strategize in that way. I think I brought an element of athleticism and differences, the way I saw the tactics of events, the races unfolding, that I wouldn't have had otherwise if I hadn't come from multiple sport disciplines. So that served me well, all those different sports. the 35 seconds Coach Ken Smith put me in for the last game of the season when we were up by 35 in basketball.
That's how much he trusted you there, right?
Yeah, literally. But I
know you're not going to blow it.
So there's that. Yeah, essentially.
You're in, Simon.
So,
you're in. You can do this. What was that scene?
Those are those moments that define you.
Well, I mean, I was going to say, like, is that one of those ones that you got quoted at one point going like, I could have been in the NBA because of those final 35 seconds, and that's live with you for the rest of your life. You missed out in a Raptors jersey at one point or something like that. But it's...
Yeah, there are those moments that define you, though. Like, you know, I remember that. I remember the feeling of not making the team, all that good stuff, all the cliche stuff that serves you. You see it when you see athletes grow up that had just success early on. The kind of, if you think of like the prodigy athletes, they don't learn how to deal with difficulty, how to fail. And the people around them don't know how to fail. So when they start to inevitably, you know, competition and catches up with them, they don't have the tools to deal with the consequences of that. And nor do the people around them have the tools to deal with it. It becomes a bit of a pointing fingers and blame game. I grew up, you know, I was 16th at junior nationals when I was 16 years old. So I knew, and I didn't make the Ontario team, let alone the Canadian team. But it sure either sets you on a course of not, you know, I don't believe myself and I can't do this, or you kind of get it, whatever you want to call it, like a bee in your bonnet that you're like, I'm going to figure this out. And you have a whole bunch of skills that come from that in terms of your expectation, how you manage yourself, how you deal with disappointment, et cetera, et cetera.
Always need those sort of moments of despair to, I guess, like, you know, work your way through it and sort of keep going with that. What was the scene like with triathlon sort of in that late 80s, early 90s? Because obviously it wasn't included in the Olympics until 2000, I believe, announced just, a year after Sydney got the games in 94. But, I mean, what was that scene, and what was it? Just the World Championships back then was kind of the pinnacle while they try and built towards an Olympic appearance?
Yeah, there was a Canadian, Les McDonald, that pushed through sheer willpower, including legendary stories of like climbing in back windows of Scottish castles to meet IOC members, kind
Wow.
of like at the IOC decision party. There's the story of Les McDonald climbing in a back window and wandering around this gathering, telling people about the sport of triathlon. So when I first got into it, you're right, it was all centered around the Hawaiian Ironman. The idea was maybe at one point in the future, it could be in the Olympics. But I just loved it. I was fully and utterly consumed by it from day one. And, you know, get obsessed, stay obsessed is the key to anything that you want to be kind of immersed in mastery of. And so I was completely and utterly obsessed with it. I knew I think I can hold my own with anybody on the trivia, the history of our sport. And so back then I was studying every aspect of it, fully just loving it. And then in 94, I'm in Sydney going to boarding school, and we go down to Circular Quay, and Juan Antonio Samaranch announces on the big screen, the Olympics will be in Sydney.
The winner is City, as he famously said. The winner is City.
That's right. Exactly. You can imagine the ruckus. I was live for that in Circular Quay, and Fantastic. I walked over to the Opera House while everyone else was celebrating, and the Opera House was empty. I walked over and I felt like a kid with the secret, like I had the first copy of the map, you know, like I was like, oh, wow. Sweet. Like so it begins. And so whatever you want to, however you feel like the universe works, that right there was a moment of like, wow, wait a minute. Like the kid who got the map first, you know, that was me. So
that's incredible just to think that, because you were literally there when they announced it, and you are at the spot where you will win the gold medal in 7 years' time. I don't think we've ever had an athlete tell that story, that they were literally at the point where they're going to be winning their Olympic medal when the games are on. That's insane.
Yeah, I felt like if the visualization, at the end of the day, this is about who thinks about it one more time than everybody else. I kind of think that that's how this all works, is that you've been through every scenario every possible scenario that can unfold one more time than anybody else. And that's the training process. And you've internalized every different outcome, every iteration that could unfold. I started before everybody else did. I literally walked. Everyone's cheering, and I like by myself. I'm 17 years old or whatever I am at the time, and I walk. I'm 18 years old. I just walked across like 50 meters, and I'm standing there, and nobody's there because it's the poetry of all this. It's like they're all over there, celebrating, and so I'm standing there with like some security guard who's picking his teeth, and me like standing going like, so I guess it would start right about like there, and the transition is going to be here, and advantage me.
Wow.
So yeah, there you go. That's it.
How is the build up towards something like that? Like what I always find interesting with athletes is the opportunity to participate in like multi-sport games prior to this. And really your first big podium in a multi-sport game, my hometown of Winnipeg here for the Pan Am Games. Did you, well, I guess the second question to that, Ben and I were just wondering, where in Winnipeg are they going to have the swimming? Which I figured was Gimli or something like that, like an hour north of the city.
Birds Hill Park.
You know what's funny? I was there just last year and I was swimming, and then I decided to go for a run, so I was 2/3 of the way to you. But did you look at something like the Pan Am Games? Like, I want to make sure that I'm not just winning on World Cup, but I want to be able to participate in multi-sport game. And what type of boost does that give to you? Does it give you an extra bit of confidence? Is there something that comes along with doing an event like that to prepare you for the Olympics?
Yeah, it's where the essence of it is when you walk into the cafeteria. you literally, this moment when you're at an event like that and you walk into a cafeteria and you see athletes from all these different sports, and you're because you're used to walking into the lunchroom at the hotel with your contingent, your cohort, your sport, but now you're walking in and there's the whatever, like in that case, there's the American runner, there's the Brazilian, there's the et cetera, and you're in the cafeteria and you're going like, huh, and you either are totally and utterly overwhelmed by that experience, and or you take it all in and adjust, and then you're kind of like, you're more comfortable in that. So then fast forward whatever that is, a year and a half later, you arrive at the Olympic Games and you've been in the cafeteria before. You've kind of experienced the things that are different than just when people try and say, oh, it's just like any other World Cup. Like, no, it's not. Like the day before Olympics, I'm jogging on the track with the Kenyans. I'm literally doing my warm up the day before Sydney. I'm jogging around the track going like, holy smokes. Like there's Hisham El Garouche and there's like, whoever, like these iconic athletes, or watching Kobe Bryant walk into the cafeteria, that does not happen at your World Cup. So those moments, to have that in Winnipeg, and I say the cafeteria quite because I remember walking in and going, and that being the like, huh, look at that. Like, look at all these athletes, look at that basketball player, look at the gymnast, look at the so-and-so. And so that really made a big impact.
Just so that Ben and I could be in equal ground here, while he's recreating your Sydney Opera House steps, can you tell me what cafeteria that was so I can go there tomorrow and have breakfast?
I think it's at the university. It would have been,
okay.
I seem to recall. It's up at the university.
Basically walking distance from me. That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah, see, there you go. Exactly.
What did you
that's
eat?
A funny moment. Bangers and mash. What were they all going to do?
Wow.
Yeah, something like that.
That works a treat. Which it's when you get to the Olympics, and we always like to hear sort of our athletes' sort of experiences outside of their competing and, village life, all that kind of stuff, which you're alluded to there. But obviously triathlon, new sport, alongside taekwondo in Sydney. Given it's literally your first Olympics, but your sport's first Olympics, is there an added sense of new kid on the block mentality? Because, you're not coming into this from other past Olympians in your sport. You're all new to this Olympic experience in 2000.
That's an interesting question. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's the story I tell myself because I'm quite careful about it. All these memories are subject to the kaleidoscope of memory, right? Like we've slowly adjusted these memories over time. So I'm quite cognizant of that. But I don't remember being overwhelmed by that or thinking of that anything to do with legacy. If I recall correctly, I was just really loved and enjoyed the whole process and I was really, because I saw the world champion, the 5-time world champion, Simon Lessing, went into that race as the overwhelming favorite, and he looked miserable. He was not enjoying the process. The pressure was on, and he did not enjoy the process. And I was the opposite of that. I was just soaking it all in, and just a wide-eyed kid wandering around, taking it all in, and really all the little magical moments. The thing that was a little bit just not disconcerting, but afterwards I thought, how do you recreate that? How do I recreate being the first to the race course, and how do I recreate like the Aussie connection that I have? My 96-year-old grandmother sitting in Kirribilli there watching her grandson compete. How do I recreate all that kind of that magic? So yeah, there you go.
Did it feel like a home Olympics for you, given you're growing up in Sydney? I mean, you're literally over the harbour there, basically, where you grew up, from where you ultimately would win that gold medal.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, with the familiarity. Crowe and Benno and I would cross the harbour bridge every Sunday. And, from 92 till basically through to Sydney, I probably was there 20 times, and back and forth. We trained up in Noosa. We raced all over Australia. We raced on the Olympic course before that. I can still, every section of it, I can recreate the entire course from memory. I mean, it's that familiar. I could 20 some odd years later, I can do this with most courses I've ever raced. But distinctly for Sydney, I could give you every nuance of that course.
Well, that's the next question, actually. So we'll get to that in a moment. But just when you were traveling around, turn three. When you were, it's like Cool Runnings when they're sitting in the bath and they're like left, right, turn, press. But when you were traveling around Australia and sort of going to the different courses, big Australian triathlete at the time, who we were all, particularly me as a Tasmanian, Craig Walton. Did you get down to Tassie and do any triathlons down in Tassie?
Oh, he's a beauty. You're talking about one of just the nicest guys you'll ever meet in your life, Waldo. I have, I mean, he's as Tassie as they come. And
careful how you put that. Careful how you put that.
Yeah, totally. Good human. Waldo gets tip of the hat, good human. I certainly, I hope in the many years to come, I hope I get to bump in and have a pint with Waldo again.
We'll organise it. We'll do the reunion. We'll do the off the podium reunion.
That'd be great. Yeah, we'll get Courtney there. We'll get Waldo. I talked to Crowe yesterday. You got a contingent of legendary Australians that McKeely and.
Well, I was going to say McKeely. I vividly remember day one, the first event. Of course, triathlon was like right at the beginning back then in Sydney, and 13-year-old Ben up at the crack of dawn to watch it, and I'm like, Switzerland winning a gold in triathlon, beating Australia. What is this? But hey, I was happy as a fan of Canada from a very young age. I'm like, well, Canada got the gold the next day, so I was happy with that.
There you go. I was up at Bond University in sometime around there, and there was this woman swimming at the pool, and she came out of the pool, which I into her, and so, what's your name? Oh, I'm Emma. Oh, okay, nice to meet you, Emma Snowsill. So,
wow.
She goes on 8 years later to win a gold medal, and we saw her at the pool as just this like age grouper that was just trying to learn how to swim. So
there's another moment in time. Two Olympic gold medalists just having this little future, and they're just meeting in time. Wow,
amazing. I like the idea of someone coming by and going like, one day she'll win a gold medal. And I'm going, oh, okay.
Quick photo. This will be history making.
Yeah. And I hadn't, this was pre-2000. So this is it was probably April of 2000. So yeah, little did we know, the two of us are standing there saying hello, and many years later we got similar hardware. So
Insane.
there you go.
I'm kind of interested by
Stories.
just what you're able to kind of relive everything in your head. I mean, I'm sure that there's nothing you've relived more in your head more than, the Sydney gold medal win. But I mean, in particular, I think probably what you've been asked more than anything is about that crash. So we both kind of watched the video in the last couple of weeks leading up to it, and we're still trying to pinpoint, okay, where specifically were you? So were you directly involved in the crash? How quick is the recovery? And I guess along with that, how common is this in triathlon, whether it's the cycling leg or even swimming is the type of contact that can set you back?
The unfortunate thing I was going to say to you is which crash, because I had a couple. I crashed in London. I crashed there. Had a couple crashes, I suppose.
How did you win medals,
right when
Simon?
you come.
No offense, but it's got to ask the question. Lucky, come on.
You go around. You go around Macquarie Chair. You come back by Andrew Boyle Charlton Pool on the left there. You go up that little kicker. There's a little rise that goes up to past the museum on the left there, or is it the library or the museum there on the left?
Yeah.
Just before you cross over that bridge, and everything narrowed down. And so there was a crash there involving, I think it was Ryan Bolton from the US. And I just got squeezed out, but I did one of those things. It's funny again, because I grew up doing other sports, I had that athleticism to slow that moment down and be like, navigate. So I didn't actually crash. I never actually I touched my feet down, but I never actually fell down. And so this group kind of splinters around me, and I kind of do the slide like some kind of BMX skill. I don't know. And I'm up and going again. And so, yeah, there you go. All those moments playing all those other sports that give you the athleticism to just keep your wits about you in a moment like that paid off in that crash, not the other ones.
I also always wonder, every time I watch the triathlon, the only thing that runs through my head is like the body shock of changing from one thing to another. Because I mean, I know if I go on a long bike ride, I mean, as soon as I get off that bike and I try to walk up my steps, like my legs are jello. They may recover, 10 seconds later, but then it's the same thing like swimming. Like how is it? Do you just train to a point where you just don't feel it anymore? Or is there always a little bit of that body shock when you're going from swimming to cycling and then into running?
Yeah, there still is that body shock where I think as you get more experienced and you've done more training, et cetera, you eventually mitigate most of that. But I don't think you ever fully mitigate. That's just a wonderfully unique part of the sport, is having to transition not only the physical side of that, but the mental side of, the tactics in swimming being different from the tactics in cycling versus running. So, but yeah, no, that body shock never goes away. You can train it, but it doesn't, that eventually, you just mitigate it, but it's all just, that's part of the fun of it, part of the ridiculous nature of it. So
I always love that mentality and that in any sport, be it in an event or outside of an event, but particularly when you've got a moment like that where you crash and then you've got to literally get back on the bike and push forward. Can you remember what was going through your mind at that point, or is it just you're such in the moment, you're just like, all right, well, bit of a bad thing, but hey, let's keep pushing forward. We're not out of it. Let's keep going forward.
That's interesting. I'm certain that so many of these memories are recreations from stories that got told, as in, I don't think that we actually remember those moments in the way in which they happened from a memory of experiencing them. Rather, we remember them from telling the story later, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the science supports that. The flow state is a state of an intuitive state where you're no longer thinking about thinking, and you're not actually you're not committing to memory anything, because you're in the moment performing. So all of these moments, I think, are just recreations of assumptions of thoughts of what might have happened. And you just frame them in a way that people are like, oh, you remember? And you go, I guess so. Mostly, kind of, sort of. So
I guess it just depends on how hard you get hit in the head as well sometimes in those moments, right? Right.
You're touching on something that's evolved, and the concussion protocol stuff now wasn't available in my day. I had a couple crashes that I start to wonder later. I'm like, oh, it certainly must have hit my head in that circumstance. So
it is fascinating how quickly that's come, right? Because you think like the year 2000, like that was only 5 years ago, right? That wasn't 23 years ago. But like you do have that mindset of back then it was advanced, but now 23 years later, you can kind of look back and then go, well, shit, no, it wasn't at all, was it?
No, it was Bush League. We were, and we'll look back, I suppose, now, 23 years from now, and go, this is Bush League too. It is narrowing. The areas in which you can find greater improvement is narrowing, but the Norwegians have come to our sport and shown there was a whole way of doing things and, ethos that was not being applied, and they have applied it. So
can I just, it's interesting you bring that up, because we talked a lot during Tokyo about Norway. Now, this is no disrespect to our good friends in Norway, but they're winter athletes. What's going on with them dominating summer all of a sudden, Simon? I'm a bit scared about Norway.
It's infuriating.
They're taking over a little too quickly, and I don't know how this came about. I mean, good for them, but I didn't know Norwegians could compete in triathlon, in athletics. Like, I'm like, whoa, okay, do we need to worry that they're the new USA and they're just going to keep winning everything in 10 years?
I mean, I think when you grow up outside, refining and perfecting your aerobic engine, it just doesn't matter that you happen to be cross country skiing, but it turns out it converts to running. And then there's an attitude. If you spend a bit of time with Gustav and Christian and Olaf, you quickly understand that there's just a shift that you're like, oh, that's a Scandinavian thing.
Yeah.
And as someone who has Swedish heritage myself, I'm kind of proud of that Scandinavian side. So, they're a different breed. It's great. It's great to watch. And then they're doing it through intellect. It's not brute force. It's not a function of, there's an intellect that's they're engaged, that they have engaged there in terms of understanding the true science behind performance. That's really fun to see, be part of, observe, whatever it is.
A couple of years ago when the Tokyo Games were canceled, CBC, they decided to re-air like the greatest Canadian moments of all time. And I think it might have even been the first week you were on it. It was that win in Sydney. So that got played all over again. And that was my first time watching it since probably 2000. And it's still now, a couple of years later, it's still going over in my mind, just as you're coming around the bend and as you're coming up on the German, that we end up in the silver position, just passing him and then looking back. And then I remember him kind of looking back as well. I just rewatched it, maybe about an hour ago, and you're seeing him looking back. And I've always wondered, like, okay, is that the moment that like you knew, okay, I've got this? Because there's always going to be somebody who's chasing. I mean, we saw Evan Dunphy do it during the last Olympics in the race walk, and you've got to always be worried. Okay, I just passed him, but he could be coming up any second now. Did you have a moment where you're like, I can relax now. I've got enough of a lead. It's 10 seconds left. I've got this.
I mean, again, it's the stories we tell ourselves about what we think happened. But I think what happened there was a moment of real understanding before I crossed the finish line that this was about to happen. Because, he seemed to his body language went from, as soon as I passed it, he kind of went, that you recognize that, oh, he's done. So yeah, I mean, again, it's the stories we tell ourselves about what we think happened. I think that's what happened. If that makes sense.
I like this. This is the way I think all people should answer the questions moving forward. I think it kind of works that way. Can you ever be prepared for what comes after winning an Olympic medal, particularly a gold? Because obviously your life changed. I mean,
and the first.
Yeah, exactly. Everything that comes from that moment, because you go into that race, Simon Whitfield, about to be an Olympian, but then all of a sudden you're an Olympic gold medalist. Everybody wants to talk to you. Sure, you've got 1,001 interviews you've got to do and everything along those lines. I mean, can you be prepared for the attention that comes with that gold medal win?
No. It's that's a whole other thing, and it's not better or worse. It's just different. But it's I've definitely, there's all these aspects of it that you think you want. You think, oh, this is going to be great. And you're sitting there are aspects of it, all of a sudden there I am having dinner with Sir Edmund Hillary a year later, and I had dinner with the Queen, lunch with the Queen of England, and like I had these incredible experiences that came with it. So you wouldn't quote unquote trade it for the world, and yet there are parts of it that you become a bit of a meme. You don't become a bit of a meme; you become a meme. You know, people, and you can never live up to this expectation. When you pedestaled. You know, the way I think it was like on the other side of adulation is isolation. There's the people you used to hang out with. They're still doing the things that you used to do, and you can't attend those things because you're no longer you're busy. You've got other things you're trying to do, other places that you're welcome to be, and it becomes it's very disorientating, and there's no manual for it. There's not really precedent for it. And I think you also become, if things become very transactional, so you instead of having relations with people, as in relationships, you have transactions with people because everybody wants something from you. And then everything is an opportunity to be, taken advantage of. And so that pattern starts to unfold, but then it kind of narrows. It starts in the far peripheral of your existence, and then it narrows and narrows until it's like right at your primary relationships. You're starting to treat them as very transactional because you've learned this behavior pattern of everything is a transaction. And you're no longer honoring relationships as, a mutual gain. Things become a very zero sum game. I can do this for X. I can trade X for Y, and therefore that's worth it. If that makes sense. I think that's. I think you also, because you get a very strong story of self, because you're getting constantly asked about your story of self. So in the curse of self, like that. So if you come to my house now, you can't see anything. There's nothing that indicates that I used to do this stuff, because I don't want to live in, as much as this is great. And I get to explore with you in this instance. The moment I put this phone down, I want to go back to my day-to-day today, and not living as this caricature of of a thing that I did before. That's a story of self, of who I am and how I interact with the world. My daughters need their dad to just, take care of his shit today. Not be living in the moments of the past. So
is that something that you have or would like to maybe help athletes, Olympians with, to kind of deal with that? Somebody like a Summer McIntosh, she was thrust in the spotlight, obviously in Tokyo, and obviously doing great things before Paris, but certain athletes where maybe they're not prepared for that, and you can help with exactly what you're saying, that these things that do come with that thrust of attention.
Yeah, for sure. But in a less formal way, then it doesn't work to be prescribed, if that makes sense. It has to come about in a way that's not as formal as you should talk to so-and-so. Just doesn't work that way. Part of the attributes of athletes and people that are immersed in something that they're so engaged in, that they mastery. They do it their own way. And to try and prescribe or step in and say, oh, well, you're going to need to do this and that, that's just not in their wheelhouse. It's not how they operate. So it has to come about in a much more, I'm trying to avoid using the word organic, but it has to come about in a more organic way than being prescribed like that. So yeah, I've had moments where I've done that, and it's I find as much benefit for me as I do for anybody else, for the other person, which is again just part of the journey. I think all that made sense.
Yeah. I mean, the amount of success that I think even most gold medalists experience is, that first couple of days, and then, maybe you'll get some recognition in your own country. But I mean, it obviously was very different for you. I remember when we first started the show, like around the Rio Olympics, and our other co-host Jared, he's Australian as well, and we're sort of going back and forth, like, oh, what are some of like the greatest Australian moments? I'm going to like great Canadian moments, and I'm thinking like, okay, what are some of the things that the Australian guys are going to know? I'm like, oh, Sidney Crosby, David Peltier, Jamie Soleil, and it was either Ben or Jared who are like, oh, Simon Whitfield. I'm like, yeah, Ben. I'm like, yo, you guys know Simon Whitfield, like, and that's sort of like me realizing, wow, like this, what you accomplished in Sydney, maybe it was because it was the first time ever, maybe it was like an Australian connection. I mean,
I also have a weird obsession with Olympics as well, where I lived and breathed Sydney for 16 days straight. So
but I mean, did the amount of success and recognition you received, not just as a national thing, but even on an international level, did that I guess put any type of pressure expectations on you for future games? Like, how did that change how you approach the sport and maybe expectations that you had going into Athens or London?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, just such a different experience, because you go from just a wide-eyed kid who just loved competing and had no quote unquote pressure to competing with expectation. But you wouldn't trade that for the world. I mean, that's the fun stuff, to have the opportunity to take the last shot, to hit the buzzer beater. That's the good stuff. So I am very grateful for the 4 different experiences I had. Were all so unique. They all had various attributes and various challenges that required various attributes to overcome or navigate through. And yeah, super grateful for all of that. It wouldn't have been fun if it would be fun. It's fun. Who cares if it's fun? It wouldn't have been as satisfying, and I wouldn't have learned as much if they were all the same experience. Mm-hmm. They were not in any way all the expectations of Athens, and not living up to those expectations. And I don't mean results wise. I mean in terms of fostering relationships and building a cohesive team. We just didn't. We cracked under the pressure, and we splintered as a group. The coaching staff, myself, there was a lot of infighting. There was a lot of, we didn't rise to that occasion. And I would trade that experience to the world. We failed. And I really don't mean because we came 11th. I mean, we failed because at the end of it, we didn't shake hands. We like walked in opposite directions, but I wouldn't trade that for the world, because all of everything that came from, all the learnings that came from that. That makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say with that, because through that, the whole strategy changes right towards Beijing, and then we get this famous situation with Colin that basically, he helps you to the silver medal. I loved what I read it described as the greatest ever 50th place finish in Olympic history, essentially. Kind of that strategy that comes from that to get that silver medal, which, like, I love reading about this in a sport where, say, somebody who doesn't follow it religiously, it might not be obvious that there is teamwork and strategy involved in a sport like triathlon. So I love kind of reading how that can take place and everything like that. Do you give him the silver medal afterwards? Are you like, here you go, Colin, this is for you. I've got a gold. I don't need a silver.
That whole thing was amazing. Just the camaraderie of it, the courage it took to do it, how unpopular it was in certain circles. It wasn't a popular thing to do. It was all just part of the experience. We felt like we pioneered something. We took a lot of criticism for it. The Federation backed it though. I look back fondly on all that and the camaraderie I have with Colin, and not just Colin, but with all of the people that were involved in that. That was a big team of people, whether it be Dano Wells, or Jordan Rapp, or those are people that didn't get to go to the Olympics, but were there. They were there when it was pouring rain, and they were there when it was not fun, and they showed up every day. And that was so much part of that. That was all of that, to be honest. Coach Joel just did an incredible job. It was all just the story of that event is the unknowns, all the things that happened behind the scenes that were so great. That was such a great experience because it was such a team thing.
I found it so interesting. Like, as a viewer of the Olympics, you know, you watch an individual event, you think of it as an individual event, and then often you see how many people are involved in it. Like you take like swimming, you know, the relays. They'll have this person who will go in the heats, and then that person is not even in the finals, and maybe the person in the finals didn't even get there. And kind of what you're talking about in Athens, like there just wasn't that team dynamic. You guys took it a step further 4 years later, and then flash forward, you know, another decade or so later, and now triathlon is literally a mixed event in the Olympics. I mean, did you still follow the sport? I mean, did you watch that? What are your feelings on the mixed event triathlon? And if you were to compete in it still, I mean, if you were in mixed event, what would be your preference?
Oh, I love the mixed. The mixed team relay is awesome. That would be my distance too. The shorter, faster stuff would have suited me quite well. I love where the sport's gone. I follow it to as best I can. I work for a company called The Feed, so we're intimately involved in all things endurance sport and pickleball now. So I get to follow a sport I love and be, you know, a couple degrees separated from athletes who are making high performance decisions, which is fun. And then, to see the evolution of the sport, all the different, we have Super League now, we have the professional tour now, we have the Ironman races at a whole other level. We have YouTube stars, you know, like it's all the good stuff and all the ridiculous stuff. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the things I just kept in perspective is this. It's so important. One of my favorite words is ridiculous. And because there's something benevolent in that word to me. There's some sort of connotation of humor in the word ridiculous. And at the end of the day, these arbitrary sports we make up to entertain ourselves and not fight, because at the end of the day, that's what the Olympics is, right? It's like, it's a reason not to go fight each other. It's like, oh, I don't know, let's pick up stuff and we'll see who's stronger. Let's move stuff around. Let's try and put a ball through a hoop.
Best explanation of the Olympics I've ever heard. That's brilliant.
It's true. And I love that part of it. When people lose sight of that, I'm like, it's so arbitrary. You know, it's like, it's just this arbitrary thing we made up. And so by keeping that attitude to it and really recognizing the reason that we do it, I think that you just there's so much to be gained from that perspective. It's a little bit a tribute to the ridiculous nature of it.
I like you mentioning you still have some type of involvement in the sport. You know, I always find interesting when somebody retires. I almost expect, okay, well, they're gonna, you know, still stick with it in some capacity. I always think back to the NHL Heritage Classic they had where the Oilers took on the Jets, and you had like Wayne Gretzky on the ice for the first time, and Wayne Gretzky, like 2 minutes in, is off the ice. People are laughing at him. He's like, hey, I don't play this anymore. Meanwhile, Mark Messier is out there as if he hadn't even been retired for a day. You know, is this a sport that you still run and bike for fun? Do you do just local events, or you just kind of watch from the sidelines, coach, anything?
Yeah, nothing. Nope, nothing. I tried to run 400 meters with my daughter the other day, and we ran slower than I used to run 10K, and I was exhausted.
So we can challenge you to a race, and we might have a chance.
Hey, there we go.
You got me tagged. I'm done for.
Good. Bring it on, Simon. Come back to Sydney. I know where to go.
I went mountain biking today, so I love mountain biking. I love stand-up paddling. I love anything. I just like being outdoors. And I get I have old man strength now, so I can do. That's the whole reason you do stuff when you're young, is so when you're older, you've got old man strength. And I play soccer, and I swim a bit, but I haven't competed. I have a funny relationship with running. I can go out for a slow trot. I would probably go for a trail run if I wasn't doing other things. But I definitely have a bit of a relationship with the idea that I used to run sub 30 minutes for 10K, and now I can't run sub 45 minutes. You know, it doesn't feel great. I don't like that. I used to love the feeling you're running, and now I kind of go like, I think I should probably stick to other things.
Pickleball,
and soccer and all that stuff. So
Well, just
yeah.
on that,
No, I love sport. So
that's where you're fitting well on this show. That's kind of when it comes down to a couple of quick ones before we get to our sort of wrap up questions. Just on the soccer, we were talking a little bit out off air. You play in the VISL, I believe, for Bays United. Great league there on Vancouver Island. Talk about your little your win that you just recently had, Simon. Come on, we want to learn this great moment you had.
Beauty. I'm going to tell you my favorite soccer moment. My favorite soccer moment is walking onto the field for Bays over 35 in the Masters B of the Vancouver Island Soccer League, and David Hill, Sheffield Wednesday fan, says to me in his wonderful British accent, "How's it going?" And I said, "It's not so great." And he goes, "Oh, let me just stop you there. I really didn't care. I just want you to stop the little round ball from going in the rectangular thing. And then I want you to take the little round ball and try and get it in the other rectangular thing. You have full permission to just do that today." And I loved that moment because it was like a tribute to the fact that we're all there just to, life is like transpiring and we're, whatever, all of the shit that goes on with trying to adult. And yet David Hill reminded me that like this is really just a bunch of kids trying to push a little round ball around to stop it from getting into other objects. So that's why I play soccer. I love the theater of sport. I don't really care if we win or lose. I like games that just have some theater to it. I like the moments when we almost upset the A division team, but and all year I felt like I played quite well. I scored a couple good, I'm proud of goals. And then I'm thinking I'm a big deal in the last game of the year. I scored an own goal. My guy scored, the guy I was supposed to be covering scored the winning goal, and I was useless. So, it's humbling and wonderful. And at the end of the day, again, it's just arbitrary and ridiculous. You're just trying to stop the little round ball.
I love how you explain this. Is just so it's just perfect. This is from now on. Like next year during Paris, Colin, that's how we're explaining it. It's just some boots on a track running fast. Cool. Yeah, good on you. That's
our commentary.
Yeah, look at that, Andre de Grasse. Good whoop-de-doo, another gold medal. That's
you move quickly.
Yeah, wow, you can move faster than the other people. Good job for you. Just one other quick thing too. I know sort of you've had a bit to do with Lance Armstrong in the past. Did you ever try and get Lance to get on a bike and also he was on a bike, get on the track and swim and go hey mate, you got the easy part, the cycle. Add the other two legs to it and let's see how well you go.
I mean, Lance came from a triathlon background.
Oh, so right.
Did he? Oh yeah, no. Oh yeah. He shows up when he's 15 years old, and the legends, Mark Allen, Dave Scott, and all of them are there. And this kid from Texas shows up and lays a whooping to him, and then goes on to do what he did and all of the other stuff that he did. And along the way, I become hilarious friends with him because we had the same agent way back in the day. And I didn't meet him. I barely knew him for almost I would be 15 years. And then I went to Orcas Island and did a swim run event with him. You're in a team together. And so I got to meet him outside of all of that, outside of all the fanfare and all of the other shit, all of the stuff that came with it. And I'll tell you a quick story. It's long-winded, but Bob Roll, I was one of the best speakers. Perfect. Bob Roll, remember, him, the Tour de France. He's the commentator for ESPN, I think.
Yep.
I was at an event in Collingwood, and it was right when Lance got busted and admitted and all that stuff. And he should, all of the punishment that comes with that, all of the shit that goes with that. And Bob Roll got asked, how can you be friends with him? How can you endorse him? And Bob said, I don't know about you, but my friends, I've got their back. And then I ask what the problem is, as in if my friends are in a fight, I run in and start throwing punches. And then I ask what we're fighting about. So Bob kind of said that. And he told this incredible story about Lance's 15 years old, showing up in New Mexico, pouring rain, doesn't have a place to stay, sleeps on the deck of Bob Roll's house, and then goes out on the race course. He's this young guy, all the legendary mountain bikers are there, all the Tour de France riders are there. And Lance takes off with them and then Bob comes up on him 2 hours hours into the event, and there's Lance with a flat tire, and he thinks, "Oh, I finally caught that 15-year-old kid." And Lance says, "Can I use your spare tire?" And Bob says, "No, I need it." And Lance rips it off his bike and says, "It's mine now." And Bob Rowe goes, "And that's Lance Armstrong."
Wow.
Yeah, right. Like, he grew up with, single. It was single. His mom was. He was only child. His mom was a single mom of a Texas kid who had talent in sport, and he behaved a lot like a Texas.
What an incredible
kid,
story.
A single mom who did whatever it took.
Wow.
Yeah, and I really it was like one of those moments where you're like, wow, we don't know where each other come from, and of course, don't cheat in sport. Of course, all that stuff. Don't act as an asshole. Don't be an asshole. Also, I came from Kingston, Ontario. I grew up in the same town as how tragedy hit. I got sent off to boarding school when I was 16 years old. I do not need to sit around and judge Lance Armstrong. I'm glad he got caught. I don't want cheating in sport, yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. I also do not need to sit there and say, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that." I did not walk a day in his shoes. So let him walk in his own shoes and let him suffer his own consequences. So there you go. There's my Lance Armstrong story.
Great way of putting that. I love that. That's perfect. I was going to ask another question about something different, but I don't think I can top that. So I'm just going to get Colin to start the wrap up questions because I don't want to take away from that moment right there.
Yeah, sweet. There you go. Yeah.
Well, our final set of questions here. Now, you would have just missed out on this because this is something that they did on the Olympic.ca website for Rio and Pyeongchang. And basically, it's like a set of questions, some of them sports related, some of them not related. Some of them include drawing pictures, which if you choose to, you're free to send them in. We've had a couple athletes send us pictures afterwards.
Never a summer athlete, Simon. Only winter athletes.
Only winter. So you got to prove the summer's better than the winter here. But
definitely.
We're going to go through these and basically just give us quick fire answer. We'll start it off with what is the best candy in the world?
Best candy in the world. Oh, the sour gummies.
Oh, okay.
And then later sour. Your tongue is all up and you're like, regret it so much. But in the meantime, it's so good.
Try drinking anything acidic after that, and it's horrible.
The worst. Yeah, stomach ache, the whole thing. The whole thing. But yeah, by far,
it's worth it.
I mean, as soon as we're done with this conversation, I'm going to go get some.
Good. Did you ever have the when you're in Australia the big sour warheads, like the kind of like the the little like those, like they
and I probably got made to eat that coated in Vegemite in boarding school.
But that's how we eat them, Simon. What are you talking about? That's how they come. You wipe off the spiders and the snakes while you eat it. On your kangaroo.
Odd lot.
Exactly. The first drawing, by the way, if you want to draw a picture of yourself, that's one. We're doing this with swimmer Santo Condorelli, and his version of himself is, I don't know where the triangle fits in the pelvis there. It's kind of like, Also,
I think he's either got discolored biceps or he's wearing water wings in his picture. I think it's water wings.
Yeah, that's one way to swim.
I do that too.
What is your favorite sandwich?
My favorite sandwich? It's got to be, I'm a yippie, which is a combination of a yuppie and a hippie. So I got to be avocado toast.
Oh, you definitely
right
lived in the northern beaches. That's definitely
that's the northern beaches. Oh, it's $37. Yeah. Oh, I'll have a flat white also.
Yeah, that's cheap now.
I just love you got a name for that too. When I got married, my brother was my best man, and he included in the speech, he called me a guppy, which he said was a cross between a geek and a yuppie. So you're a yippie and I'm a guppy.
Yippie. Yeah.
Yippie.
Yeah. I'm just Tasmanian river in Egypt.
This one's always fun because I think we've seen the majority of them, but what's your favorite sports movie?
My favorite sports movie? Hoosiers, just because I have, the memories back in when you're a little kid. Gene Hackman and just it was Chariots of Fire. Boom. Easy.
Oh yeah, love that movie.
When he runs the lap with the belt, dun, 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 dun,
I was going to say, can we
Yeah,
get
that whole
like,
thing.
we'll dub over your win in Sydney crossing the line.
I don't know
Before
how
the
many
bell.
times. Yeah, I don't know how many
Beach
times
run.
I'll be out running and I put that on a playlist. That's the perfect running song.
But did Mr. Bean ruin it? You obviously were, carrying
You were
carrying the
there.
flag out, obviously, in the Olympic Stadium in London. I don't know if you got to see the Mr. Bean segment, but did that ruin it? No.
That didn't ruin it, but I'm sure Richie Beno and the 12th man could ruin it. There's a little Aussie.
Hey,
yeah.
you made me happy bringing that up, Simon. I tell you now, it's funny because
The wild world of sports.
Well, the one that, so Colin, basically we had this comedian who our cricket commentators were kind of celebrities in themselves. And so he parodied all the cricket commentary, and he got well known and then made the cricket commentators even more famous. He did do one after Sydney. Did you ever hear the one he did of Bruce McAvaney after Sydney? The only time he ever.
Oh yeah,
that was
he's a
like
legend.
a 5-minute little. I'll find it and send it to you, Colin, because he does like the perfect. Bruce
How are you going to
McAvaney.
find one that's politically correct?
Ah,
That's
we
the
won't
hard
play it
part.
on air. Like we're not going that way. We'll just flick it to Colin off
Do you
air.
remember the
and
one?
go,
Do you remember the one where he's like, like he's making the car noises, and then he has the huge crash, and he says, "Finally, some fucking action."
Oh yeah,
These
the Formula.
cars are
He was doing
going
Formula
round
One.
and
He's like, "This race is so fucking boring, and now finally there's some action."
action.
I always the one he did when he would like be parodying like soccer, and he was basically like going through all the commentary names, and they're all very like Greek or Italian, and then he gets one, passes it to Smith. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Because he's like doing all these
that's a great
over the top
show.
notes. Oh, hilarious. Colin, you wouldn't get all the cricket stuff in it, but like I'll send you the Bruce one. It's freaking. Is there a triathlon, like if not a movie, like documentary? Like we're in this golden age of sports, sort of like Netflix shows. Like, is there anything following the triathlon circuit that you're aware of?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's got to be in the mythology of our sport, the Iron War, Dave Scott versus Mark Allen.
Mm-hmm.
I think Bob Babbitt in the Competitor magazine did a documentary on that, and that's an iconic moment in our sport, and certainly in part of the mythology of our sport.
I don't know how old your kids are, Simon, but my kids almost daily watch a movie with the triathlon, which is the Pixar movie Luca. Where the kids turn into a sea monster, but the final leg is eating a bowl of pasta because it takes place in Italy. So they do the mountain biking, the swimming, and then they have to eat a bowl of pasta. So there we go. We got
The greatest reference to triathlon ever is what's the TV show? He says, "I do triathlon." And the guy goes, "Oh yeah, me too. I love to be the best at exercise."
Wow.
just absolutely nails us. So there you go.
We always like to try and reference like
any other rapid fires?
Yeah, no, we've got a couple more here. We'll get to this. If you could have lunch with any,
sweet.
well, I mean, you said you had lunch with the Queen, so I don't know how you can top this one. If you could have lunch with any one person, who would it be?
If I can have lunch with, sorry, this is so tacky, but it's got to be my folks. They live out in Ottawa. I get to see them like twice a year. So if I'm getting lunch with anyone, it's my sister and my.
That's the smartest answer anybody's ever given on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna skip a couple here because I got a really good one. As a kid, my favorite sports team was.
Oh, you're going straight to that.
Yeah.
See where you're going with this, Colin.
I grew up in the era. I grew up in the era of Wayne Gretzky and the Edmonton Oilers. So
okay.
I'm sorry, but
I can't fault you.
Calgary fan here, so
Yeah, good luck. I met Lanny McDonald. That was cool.
Oh wow!
I've got
Lanny with the mustache. Yeah.
Wow, I actually have
Iconic
a coworker
photos.
who, as a move-in when I moved into my house, he got me this framed picture, and it's got autographed Lanny McDonald on there, and I've had it hanging right now, but
and
we just
why haven't you given it to me? Like, come on, you Maple Leafs fan. That doesn't matter to you. Come on, there. A couple other ones here with the drawing again, Simon. You can draw a Canadian animal. There is the coolest Olympic medal. This isn't on the list, but we haven't asked this question. This is the last one we'll ask in terms of, and I'm very intrigued to hear your answer for this. What do you do with your Olympic medals?
They're
not on display. We know that.
They're not a display. They're in. I have actually. When I was announced as the flag bearer, I went to Ottawa. You go to the Eternal Flame in front of Parliament. They take the flag off the Peace Tower and they give it to you. And so I have a box in my room that's got this flag. That's the Peace Tower flag, Canada flag, and inside that box is the medals sitting there. So
that is a cool way of doing it
over there.
Yeah. Better than the sock drawer.
Yeah,
we get a sock drawer a lot.
That's the thing. They were in a sock drawer for a long time, but now they're in that box. So there you go.
Just before we close out, I have an even more important question for you. So official last one. Your favorite Tragically Hip song?
Ahead by a Century. But also look up Gloria live. I took my buddy Rob down to the railroad track. I took him in, I tied him on his back. They do the song Gloria, but then he goes into this impromptu, this whole shtick. It's on YouTube. It's incredible. It's Gord Downey at his peak Gord Downey, and he inserts that in the GLORIA song, and it's absolutely incredible. So,
that sounds like a live version of a early song they had, Highway Girl, where he does another one of those long stories.
Yeah, sweet. Yeah, Highway Girl's good too.
Colin, you didn't do the Meatloaf question though. Was that replacing the Meatloaf question?
Song?
Yeah, what's your favorite Meatloaf song?
Yeah, no, I abstained.
Okay, that's fine.
Perfect. Simon,
you're one instance I'm a vegetarian.
There we go. That's our new number one answer, Ben.
I like that. That's fantastic. Good job. Yep.
Simon, we've talked about having you on here for years. We're so thrilled it finally happened, and I can't say there's anything I'm more excited about than maybe by 2030 being able to watch you again compete in pickleball. We just hope to talk to you again someday, regardless of what the sport is.
Oh, look at that. He's ready.
I got my racket. We're going to go play with the kids right now. So, hey, thanks for having me on. I know we went back and forth to try and get on, and I missed my last one, and I apologize for that. But this was, I really enjoyed this. So thank you for the opportunity to come on and have a good laugh and talk Aussie for a little bit there. That was fun. So, appreciate the opportunity.